really want to thank Code Pink and CCPJ and everybody who helped organize this event at stunningly short notice. I mean, I think everybody who got here should also be congratulated for having had their eye on the ball and looking at the emails and whatever to get here in time, which is great because this is a really, really important issue. And, you know, we had the spectacle before of people in the Senate voting for the war-enabling resolution against Iraq, and then it turned out that only 6 of them had actually read it, including Senator Clinton. So this time I think we need to be very clear what the members of the House and Senate are being asked to do and what so far too many of them have done in terms of ratcheting up the, not just the rhetoric, but the enabling legislation for a war. And that's what it was in October 2002. It was an enabling resolution. And then Bush took it and ran with it and launched the war. So I think Kara has set that up really well for us. I want to start off by listing 4 misconceptions about what is being threatened in our name against Iran. The first misconception is that it is not really an act of war. People don't say we're going to declare war on Iran. People talk about possibility of a surgical strike or an attack. They never say a war, but of course, you know, if somebody came and bombed Albemarle County office building from outside this country, it would be an act of war. You know, we would consider it to be an act of war, and under international law, it would be an act of war. So when they talk about, you know, taking out this or that target inside Iran, don't be fooled, that is an act of war. That legitimizes, under international law, all the actions that Iran can take in self-defense. And remember that we have 150,000 troops deployed, thanks to George Bush's surge, spread out very, very thinly in very vulnerable positions at the end of very vulnerable supply lines, very close to Iran's borders. So, you know, this question, it's not really an act of war, it would be an act of war. Even a naval blockade, as Kara mentioned, that this concurrent resolution is calling for a naval blockade, that would be an act of war. The only people who can declare a naval blockade, is generally considered by international lawyers, is the Security Council of the United Nations. But that is not what's being discussed in the Senate and the House right now. Okay, the second misconception is that if we take out Iran, or some, you know, subset of, that the Arab states will all really support it. And that's what they are secretly telling the administration. And they say, you know, they build on this kind of Arab versus Persian discourse, and they build on this Sunni versus Shiite discourse. Don't believe a word of it. I have spent more time in the Arab world than anybody in this current administration, with a few exceptions. Dating back to 1974, when I first went to work as a journalist in Lebanon. My husband and I were in Cairo and Jordan, and I was in Syria last year, and then I was in Syria and Lebanon again this year. We met all kinds of high-level and low-level and mid-level people from Arab countries, and they unanimously said it would be disastrous for them if the US attacked Iran. So don't believe a word of what these people tell you when they say that secretly the Arabs want us to do it. And in fact, if you look at what the Arab states closest to Iran are doing and the Arab states further from Iran are doing, they are all reaching out to Iran. President Ahmadinejad was the guest of honor at the Gulf Cooperation Council meeting back in February. George W. Bush was not. I just leave it there. Okay, the third misconception, that the Iranian people will all really support it. I probably don't need to unpack that anymore. But there is this idea, such as the Israelis had when they attacked Lebanon in 2006, that when they launch this massive attack against Lebanon, somehow the Lebanese people will rise up against Hezbollah. You know, that is not psychology. My family grew up in, well, my family is from London, and so we have these vivid memories of the Blitz. When the Blitz happened, the British knew quite who to blame. When Israel attacked Lebanon in 2006, the Lebanese people knew quite who to blame. If we attack Iran, Iran will not blame their own leaders. They will blame us. So don't be fooled by that misconception either. And then the fourth misconception I'm going to look at is the question, if we don't do it, then Israel should. And that is, in a sense, the most dangerous and damaging. And it's gotten a recent airing in this new New York Times article by my longtime friend Benny Morris, who is extremely disoriented these days, thinking that Israel could somehow attack Iran, launch an act of war against Iran, and that it wouldn't affect us. Of course it would affect us, because for Israel to get to Iran, their fighter planes would have to go through American-controlled airspace. They can't do that without our permission. The retaliation would be against Israel, and it would be against us, and with considerable justification under international law, because we would be complicit in that act of war. So we should be under no illusions whatsoever about what's really at stake if there is a war against Iran. What's at stake is, first of all, there's 150,000 US troops who are spread out in Iraq, very close to Iran's borders, and the supply lines that supply them, which go up and down, by and large up and down the Gulf, and they have a lot of supply depots and naval bases in Qatar and Kuwait and Bahrain. So all of those would be targets. And the people in the Pentagon, you know, this is a little odd, people might not know this about me. I'm a Quaker, I've been a Quaker for a number of years now, and I'm a deeply